Right, good afternoon to those of you that are joining this session to talk about sales for offshore passage making. We're delighted to have our partners North Sales with us this afternoon in strength to talk about the various aspects of planning your sail wardrobe for offshore passage making and the things you should be thinking about and looking out for. As we've only just opened the room, we'll give it a few more minutes as we see the participants joining. So welcome to you on this afternoon session, certainly afternoon where we are here in the UK. But we look forward to the next hour of interesting discussion, all to do with sales. Just a reminder for those of you perhaps are new to the webinar, just if you would like to ask a question to be answered by the panelists, just use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and put your question in there, and we will make sure that that is, where possible, answered during the session. So welcome to those of you that are still joining. We've got some definitely people from UK, from Germany. Numbers are slowly going up, and we'll get the webinar underway by an introduction of those that you'll see on the screen with us in the room. First of all, I'd like to introduce Jeremy Smart, who's from North Sales in the UK. He's our lead contact with our partnership, and he would like to introduce his own team. So, Jeremy, over to you.
Thanks, Andrew. Yes, my name is Jeremy Smart, and I've worked for North Sales UK since 2000, year 2000. So over 20 years now, and in that time done lots of different sort of sailing, lots of racing, but also lots of cruising as well, and did actually do an Atlantic crossing back in 1996. So have some experience of what you guys are planning. And to assist and help me with the presentation tonight, I've got Bob Mahar from North Sales in the US, from Fort Lauderdale, and Ridgely McKenzie, who runs the service team, and he's based out of Annapolis. So I'll just let those guys introduce themselves to you. Bob?
Hi guys, I'm Bob Mahar with North Sales in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We see a lot of people that finish up the rallies in the Caribbean, and certainly people that go back and forth to up and down the east coast of the US quite a bit. Get to serve a lot of cruising sailboats that are enjoying either dodging hurricanes or running back to the Caribbean, either way. We've learned a little about a lot of different kinds of boats, probably not as much about yours as you know, but look forward to discussing all the different options available to you.
And Ridgely?
And my name is Ridgely McKenzie. I'm part of the service team in Annapolis, Maryland, and we service all the boats here on the Chesapeake, some transients, and getting people ready for short passages. I'm a third generation sailmaker, and I've been born and raised here in Annapolis my whole life.
Great, thanks guys. So we're going to do a short presentation first before we get into questions and answers, just to tell you a bit about North Sales and where the company came from and what we do, just to give you some background for people that don't know North Sales that well. But yeah, feel free to put questions on the chat box, on the Q&A box, and yeah, we'll get into them after the short presentation. So yeah, Bob's going to start off this section.
All right, thank you all. We just thought it was going to be useful to let you know a little bit about North Sales before we get into the specifics of a lot of the things that you might want to discuss. We've got our contact info here for anybody who's got questions for us after the event, and we'll have it listed at the end of course. North Sales as a company is the largest sailmaking company in the world. It's been around for 60 years. We make more cruising sails than any other sail making company. And in fact, when you want to see where the evolution is happening, the last 3 product launches North Sail has had have been in the cruising market. This year, we launched our Helix furling Gennaker that can do most of the job of both a Code Zero and an asymmetrical spinnaker while living up and furled. And then 2 3DI products in the past years, our Ocean 370, which is a Dyneema polyester hybrid, and Ocean 330, which is a polyester version of the 3DI molded sails. People know North Sails as because of the racing successes, and they're significant. They are. And also, we have some really cool sails on a lot of big super yachts. But just like in other aspects of society, the lessons learned from all of those things trickle down into real life, to people that have retired and they're enjoying their 45-foot boat, and they just want things easy, simple, and reliable. We help make that happen with the lessons that you see in some of the biggest, fanciest things out there on the water. So that's North Sails in a snapshot. We've got a lot of design related things that Jeremy can talk about.
Yeah, so at North Sails, all our sails are custom designed to fit each rig and each boat. And we've got a full sort of design suite to ensure that the sails are going to fit perfectly and work perfectly for what you're after. So if you're preparing for an arc or a long blue water cruise, yeah, one of the things to think about is your sail plan, your rig plan. You may be installing an inner stay. You may be changing the furling system and altering something on the boat. And our design sort of system we can factor all that in and ensure that the sails that we supply you, the head sails, the main sail, all going to fit perfectly, reef well. Inner jibs are going to fit nicely and sheet around the rigging, and this can all be checked and set up in the design program before the sails are even built to ensure that the sails are going to work and do what they're supposed to do for you. And obviously, one of the benefits of a sail that fits well and works well, obviously, is that as a result, your boat is, going to be safer. It's going to be, the sail's going to fit the rig properly. So they're going to be flat cut, not going to be too deep. And as a result, the passage making you get is going to be as quick as possible for your boat. And the sails are going to be designed, specifically for the purpose that you're looking for them to be.
One of the things I often hear when I'm talking to people in advance and ask them what kind of sailing they're going to do, or the 2 words that just ring in my ears. I'll say, well, what kind of sailing are you planning? And they'll say, just cruising. And I think folks on this webinar understand there's going out with your in-laws a couple of times a year in nice protected water, and then there's what you're about to do, or even doing it upwind. There's a big difference between one type of cruising and another. For folks that are doing what you're doing, that are committing large chunks of their lives to going places on their boat, sail design can make a big difference. It changes weather plans. Weather windows get bigger because you can get places upwind a little faster, reaching a little faster. Suddenly the 150-mile days might turn into 175-mile days. The boats stand up a little better, take a little less toll on your body when you're not heeling as much on a monohull. Sail design isn't just about speed. It's about what it does for you. It gives you time, it gives you safety, and it gives you comfort. So all those fancy fast boats racing around America's Cup courses, or the TP-52s blasting around the Mediterranean, the lessons learned from that make your life better. That's our goal.
That's absolutely it. I mean, North Sails has a reputation of being a racing sailmaker, but in reality, as Bob mentioned in the previous slide, we make more cruising sails than we do racing sails, and more cruising sails than any other sailmaker. All our design software, which has been sort of developed for America's Cup and Volvo races, it's great at designing really nice, great quality cruising sails, and as a result, you get fantastic fitting sail.
Originally, you're pretty uniquely qualified to talk about service, aren't you?
Yeah, so I think North Sales Service is something special because of our Blue Books procedures that we have. Um, the way that we have a Blue Book for our production, we have a similar Blue Book for our service procedures where every North Sales loft has the same information on how to address a repair. And this is all based off information that we've received over the past 60 years and been able to take in the data and reuse it. We have more service locations in the world than any other sailmaker. So you can expect the same quality of service at any of these locations. I think it's something special. It's not like going to your standard mom and pop shop. You actually know the quality that you're going to receive when you enter the building. I think it's pretty impressive, honestly. And we have our global communication. It's an interloft forum where we can speak with lofts from other countries all over and communicate whether it be a problem with a specific customer, type of boat, sail, or just a unique problem with a sail, and understand if anybody's had to deal with that, how the best procedure to deal with it. One of the cool things about North Sales is when you purchase a new North Sail, we stand behind our product with a 1-year free sail care. So almost anything that happens to the sail in the first year of owning and using the sail, we will take it in, do our 10-point inspection, and get it right for you for the next go around. And that lasts for as many times as you want to bring the sail in. I think it's great that we stand behind our product that way.
We had a guy who here in Fort Lauderdale, we have the occasional rat problem. And a rat got on a guy's boat, chewed a hole in his sail about 6 months after he'd gotten it. Nothing big, just something small. And he called, sure enough. Yeah, that's covered. We fixed it.
Oh yeah. I think it's pretty impressive what our 1-year free sail care will cover.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty cool. I wish I had some photos of it to share, but we had a guy that had a brand new 3DI ocean sail where the whole clew section, probably 10 feet down the foot and 10 feet up the leach, got destroyed in a storm. It was from improper furling. The sail wasn't furled all the way and secured. But we were able to take that sail and have a new clew section molded and then glue it back into the sail where the customer doesn't even notice that anything happened to a sail. That's how good the repair came out.
I've enjoyed the communication. I mean, even preparing for this, we got to talking this morning. A boat that had some repairs done down here, but didn't have time to do them all. They needed to get out. There was some weather coming. So our team had done some repairs to the sail. Boat ends up in Annapolis. They're getting the sails off there. Ridgely and our service manager were able to coordinate, discuss the repair, take a look at some photos. He's rolling right in, knowing what was done, being able to provide the same level of satisfaction. And now the guy's going to head off to New England, knowing that if anything else happens, there's a network behind him that's taking care of the boat.
Yeah, it's something pretty special there.
Okay. All right. As people are preparing for the ARC, we have a number of lofts in Southern Europe, specifically here in Spain, as well as in the Canaries, where service can either be done. If you've got sales coming in, they can be delivered there, but just a different network and the largest network able to help you get ready if you're not, or put the last minute touches on the sale. Similarly, in the Caribbean, a variety of places when you get there that are going to be able to tune up anything that happened along the way. And then, of course, up into North America, there's more service facilities on the East Coast of the US than any other. It's probably a good idea to talk about what we offer. I think all three of us will chime in on this a little bit. We didn't want to get into too much detail in any one of it and really just leave that for Q&A. But basically, for Upwind Sales, in general, there's 4 kinds of materials. There's woven polyester or Dacron. There's radian, which is also a woven polyester, but it's engineered differently. So the fabric is built to be radial paneled, where all the panels emanate from the clue. Similar radial cut is a traditional Mylar paneled laminate. Our NPL Tour is the cruising version. And then, of course, 3DI, which is a unique 3D molded composite structure that is just proving to be an unbelievably effective cruising product. Downwind Sales, everybody names them a little bit differently. We can get into what they actually are and how to tell things apart between different brands and different sales. But the G0 is kind of a typical cruising code 0. G1's an all-purpose asymmetrical. Helix Furling Jenniker's new. It's basically a kind of a flat G1 mold, but it's designed to be left up and furled, so it's easy to use as a code 0. And then the G2 is a big, deep downwind asymmetrical. And then kind of a unique sail, our tradewind sail, which looks like 2 code 0s zipped together on the luff that can double up and serve as a reaching sail, or get splayed out and be a big downwind sail like that. So those are products available. We wanted to drop a quick slide on that, so if people have questions, maybe they can refer to these, or if not, you will have heard some of the names before.
And what I would say there is, obviously going downwind is a big part of the art, but we don't want to just talk about going downwind today. But we did do a talk previously, which is on record, which some of you may have seen, which was specifically on downwind sails. So if anyone's really looking at downwind sails, they can go back and have a look at that talk for the full sort of selection of those sort of Jennikers. Obviously, it's important to be able to have a setup for your boat that works for you in terms of being safe and easy to use, and having a downwind setup is good, obviously for the art. But we're also going to be talking today about sailcloth in general, and getting those products that you mentioned there, the Dacron, the Radian, NPL Tour. They're all really good, sort of durable options to look at, as well as 3DI Ocean for this sort of crossing.
I just chip in and ask a question at this point. I'm preparing my boat to go long distance cruising. I've been the mom and pop sailor before, just coastal cruising, not really going long distance, and I'm now about to set off. What's the first sort of thing that I should do to check that my wardrobe of sails is actually the right wardrobe for the trip I'm about to do? Where do I start, and how do I go about making those choices?
Funny you should mention that. That's our next slide.
I mean, there's obviously there's lots of different types of boat that cross the ocean and do the arc. From my point of view, what I'd normally recommend, if it's possible for the rig that you've got on the boat, would be to have a mainsail that's deep reefable. So it's got 3 reefs in it. So if you do get any heavy airs, you're fully covered, down to reduce the sail plan down and really control the mainsail. And also, again, likewise with the head sail, many head sails these days are going to be furling head sails, and just make sure it's a really good, reliable head sail that can be furled down deeply. That has got potentially this big overlapping genoa that's got a padded luff on, so that you get a better shape when the sail is partially furled. And Bob's got some pictures showing the sort of shape you can get from a sail that's got a padded luff on it.
Oh, no, hang on, I'll get back to it. This one here, this would be the reefed sail, but you're talking about one that was like a head sail.
So that's a mainsail with a reef in it there, and it's setting, it's set up nicely, that reef, it's pulled in nice and flat, and it's giving a nice shape still. Obviously, sometimes when you furl a genoa deeply, you do lose the shape a little bit. And with a padded luff, we do a padded rope luff at North Sails instead of a foam luff. You can still get a really nice looking sail. So that's a Dacron crosscut overlapping genoa that's had a good few rolls put in it, and it's still setting a nice shape with the padded luff in there.
With a reef, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So what the padded luff does, it's tapered, so it's fatter in the middle and tapers out the ends, and that just sucks away a bit of shape as you roll it, and makes the sail a bit flatter as it rolls away.
I think one of the unique things about our padded loft is the fact that it's actually rope as opposed to foam. And when you use the rope, it actually takes away the thickness or the shape of the sail. And when you use the foam, it just compresses on itself, not flattening the sail nearly as much as our staged rope loft does.
Yeah, so definitely having a mainsail and a genoa that you can get away nicely. You can reduce the sail area, and they're going to still hold a nice sail shape and perform well. Is kind of important on a transatlantic crossing. And then other things that are sort of non-negotiable, well, not non-negotiable, but highly recommended. If you can get it on your boat, would be to have an independent stay where you can fly a storm jib from. So if it did really all go bad, you've got a nice point to attach a storm sail to, and you haven't got to worry about unfurling genoas and dropping them to the deck to hoist the storm sail. You've got an independent stay where you can have the sail ready to go. And that'd be a good way to. I'd recommend someone to set up the boat if they're able to. But obviously, different boats, not all boats can have an inner stay fitted. It's a lot of work to do sometimes on the rig and the boat. In which case, there are other options for getting a storm jib on there.
Ridgely, you gave us a good list of things that people should check on their sails or add to a sail plan or their boat before a crossing like this, because you see what happens when this doesn't happen. I mean, you catch all this stuff and end up having to repair the things that break or chafe most often. Why don't you run down this?
Yeah, so kind of the most standard area to chafe is on your stanchions and your spreaders, and or shrouds, depending on how you're sailing. You want to make sure that your spreaders have spreader boots on them or some sort of padding on them to protect from the chafe. But to match that, you would like to make sure your spreader patches on your head sails fit in the right place and that they're on the sail. Same thing with the main. You want to go through and make sure all the spreader patches that you have on your mainsail hit the spreader, and then you want to go through and reef the sail down and make sure that when the sail's reefed that you have patches for those spreader locations as well, because that will change on the sail. Always checking the stitching, looking for any breaking stitching on your furling covers, because the furling covers are just sacrificial to protect the sail from the sun. So if that starts to go, chances are you could be opening yourself up to some bigger problems. You want to have all that inspected before you do any large passages. When you're out sailing, you want to do your best to put your sails away dry. If you can't do it because you're in a squall, the next dry moment you have, pull them out and sail with them and let them dry out naturally. That way you prevent yourself from getting mold and mildew. It's not really fun doing an Atlantic passage or any sort of ocean going passage with smelly sails. It's just not ideal. And along with checking in for your reefs, making sure what type of reef system you have, whether it's you have reef hooks on the tack end of the boom, or if you have continuous reefing, single line reefing, whatever it may be, making sure it works properly. And if you have the dog bones, making sure that they're the proper length to reach to your hooks, because too often people end up having to lash their dog bone to their hook, which you don't want to catch yourself doing that in a storm. Going through and making sure you have, this is probably best to do with your local sail maker, is go through your sail inventory and develop a sail repair kit based off the sail inventory that you have. If you have nylon downwind sails, you're going to want some nylon tape with some PSA adhesive on the back of it. If you have all Dacron inventory, you're going to want some insignia, some hand sewing thread, some sheets of Dacron, and then if you have like a 3DI sail, you want to maybe consider getting our glue. It's kind of special about the 3DI is that you can sew it and repair it just like any other sail, or you could be on board and you tear your sail and you have a little bit of our 5-ply material that's specially made for the 3DI. And then you have our high sol glue, which I have here. I don't know if I can share my screen. Can I share my screen? Yeah.
Just shove it up to the camera.
All right. So this is the high sol glue. It's a 2-part glue that feeds through the tube, pre-mixes for you. Very simple to use. You may have to sand the sail a little bit depending on what series of 3DI you have, but it's got a quick work life. Within 24 hours, you can have your sail back up and running with very minimal work. So, also the advantage is you could do it when you're out in the ocean, as opposed to having to take it into a loft and stop your passage there.
Or carry a sewing machine.
Or carry a sewing machine. That's a lot of that.
Photo. Sorry, have you got that photo, Bob, of the spreaders and the spreader patches and that?
From the other one, yeah. Give me 1 second. Yeah.
So yeah, one of the things that obviously originally mentioned there at the top was it's very important on a long crossing like this to make sure you got patches on your head sails and your main sails to where they might impact spreaders, and also a lot of it is about preventing chafe and preventing damage to sails, so keeping an eye on stuff and making sure that any potential chafe that's going to happen.
Another another area. I would say also make sure your radar domes, your steaming lights, all that has a guard on the front of it, or you have patches on your sail to protect against those areas. When the sail tacks or drives, it rubs against that.
Yeah, so in these photos here, you can kind of see that top right one. They've got, as you can see, a spreader patch, like a full length spreader patch on there, but it's not quite hitting the marks. So when you do sort of mark up your spreader patches and get your sail maker to put them on, make sure that the patch is long enough to actually fully protect the end of the spreader where the sail's going to be rubbing away and chafing on it. And you probably want to have these for full main and at least the first reef, maybe the second reef as well, so that you're covered, when you've got reefs in, that the sail isn't rubbing away and causing damage at the end of the spreaders.
I think that center photo, that the center top photo there is great, except for minus the spreader doesn't actually have a spreader boot on the end of it. So that particular spot gets chafed, especially when you trim the sail in. If you trimmed it a little too far, chances are you're leaning against it, wearing the sail. So I think it's really important to add something to that tip there.
Yeah, so I think this photo, that middle photo you pointed out, was taken from a boat about to do the arc, and they'd done their own thing. There was some pipe cladding to protect on the spreaders, but yeah, it would be nice if they did something like that bottom left photo as well, where they got a little protection actually on the end of the spreader as well.
Looks like a pool noodle.
Yeah, something going on there. Yeah. Just round them off and stop the sail rubbing away, because when it's rubbing on there for a week or two, any sail material, no matter how durable, is going to start to show a bit of chafe.
We've got some questions I can read and toss to you guys about. Andrew Fowles asks, how useful is an asymmetric on an Atlantic crossing? Yeah,
I would say it's it depends on the cut of the asymmetric, how useful it's going to be, but if it's a running orientated asymmetric, it's definitely a useful sail to have in the inventory. I mean, a lot of boats doing the arc are not running dead downwind, not necessarily running at 180. Quite often you're spending a lot of time at 155 true wind angle, 160 true wind angle because of the seascape and the waves. And those sort of angles are perfect for an asymmetric. So your asymmetric will set, it's not going to set dead downwind, but it will set from 160 to 110 true wind angle. So when you're in that sort of range, yeah, an asymmetric is going to set quite nicely. And I know a lot of boats will look to sail across the Atlantic with an asymmetric rather than a symmetrical sail.
We talked briefly about how we're trying to simplify things with some options. We've got as a general rule, 3 categories of asymmetricals, and this is the same for any sailmaker. There, you have to build sails with a base mold that do certain things, and in our case, we've got to call it a cruising code 0 up here, the G0. that's designed for certain wind speeds and certain wind angles. Then you've got a G1 that can do a little deeper, not as high, and then a big G2 downwind asymmetrical that is really intended to go, say 135 degrees apparent wind angle, a little higher in low winds and a little deeper in heavier winds. Those are useful when you're trying to decide, what kind of sail do I need? The answer is always, well, what do you want to use it for? You can use all sorts of different kinds of sails, and you can get really confused by the terminology. The downwind sails largely come as a question of how wide they are across the middle. And this is, again, a little general, but it's a nice little example of a big, deep running G2 for those deep angles is very round. An all-purpose G1 is a little skinnier. And as you get into the cruising code 0 or the true code 0 and then cruising code 0 world here, you can see the morph. This, of course, looks like many of our body types when we go from our 20s to our 30s to our 40s to our 50s. In my case, just kind of get softer and rounder the whole time. But each one will serve a different purpose in a cruising inventory. Of course, no one's going to pack 3 or 4 different downwind sails on a cruising boat. That's just not realistic. So you end up with 1 or 2 that are designed to do the widest range possible, like that. Andrew also asked about, does using 2 foresails, 1 on each side of the boat, both rigged from the main forestay, does that work well in practice when sailing directly downwind? I know what that sounds like, Jeremy.
Yeah, that does work well. So yeah, a lot of boats set up with a twin headsail setup and do have and pull out one to windward, and quite often trim the leeward one on the end of a boom. So like prevent the boom out and have the end of the boom, a block on the end of the boom for trimming the leeward one, and goose wing downwind with the twin headsail setup. And that is a good setup, and you can rig it up so that even though they're both up the same forestay, they can be dropped independently. There are ways to do that, and that's nice. And then you can also do what the tradewind sail that we touched on very briefly earlier, and in our downwind talk, that's also a nice way of doing it, which is your own Jenica that flies forward of the forestay and does that same job for you, but on with a larger sort of lighter weight sail, so it'll work better further down the range. And that's a similar sort of style of thing where, apart from the main forestay flying free forward of the forestay, where you have 1 set to windward and 1 set to leeward, and it's a great setup for tradewind sailing, as is the twin headsail setup.
And I'd also add that answers a little different on monohulls and multi-hulls. On a monohull, I think you need a pole for the windward sail that was sprung out to windward. On a multi-hull, depending on the foot length and the LP length of the sail, you almost certainly don't. You can get away with a second headsail off to leeward. Some people use an existing code 0 on the furler on the sprit on a multi-hull off to leeward and try and fly the Genoa out to windward. Again, with the variety of shapes in catamaran headsails, and I guess monohulls too these days, there's small jibs and then there's big Genoas. It really depends what you have up, but you should certainly try and see if you can do both of them side by side out there. If you can't, then we also, North, and I'm sure others, make what we call the tradewind sail, which is designed to be, it's essentially 2 sails joined right down the middle like this, flying with a very low aspect. All your power is down low. This would be the same if you kind of engineered it yourself. The thing about the tradewind sail is it's symmetrical, so you can also sail it with, let's see if I can get the picture bigger. You can also sail them on top of each other. So it's kind of an all-in-one. It's a deep downwind sail, and it's also a reacher when you just double it up and lay them on top of itself. So.
Yeah, and you could have the tradewind sail and also the twin head sail set up. That'll still be quite nice, because the tradewind sail is a lot bigger in area than the twin head sail setup. Twin head sail setup works quite well in that you can furl them both away, and you have them both sort of partially furled. So if it gets windy, you just start rolling away till you've got half a sail left, and then you've got the same setup with half a sail left. The tradewind one is definitely more for it's going to be all out. It's going to be giving you like the best of the speed you can, up to sort
Taking
of
some
20 knots.
taking some of the questions in order. David asks, when we mentioned 3DI before, he says 3DI 370, and we'll explain what that is. He says 3DI 370 is pretty new. Should one consider the 700 series due to longer time in the field? And it looks like he's got a 55 Oyster as context with that. What's your experience with both of those products, Chairman?
Yeah, like you mentioned, the 3DI 700's been around longer. 3DI Ocean 700 has been around longer, but it's the same technology on the 370. It's just different fibers, so there's nothing to be worried about going for the Ocean 370. It's just that rather than it's a mixture of spectra and polyester in that, whereas there's a higher quantity of spectra in the 700. So for an Oyster 55, it's kind of either one of those products is going to be good. It's going to work well, and they're both going to be super durable. The 700's got a higher spectra content, so it's going to be lower stretch, but they're both very durable styles.
Originally, he also mentions he's got an in-mast furling main. What's your experience with the two products on a furling spar?
And honestly, I think they operate very similar. You don't notice too much of a difference when you go to install one versus another. I can't really tell you that I've even noticed, to be honest.
Right.
I wouldn't say there's really any difference in the noticeable factor of it.
Yeah, I suppose the only thing will be because the Ocean 700 has got a higher spectra content, it's probably ended up being potentially a lighter sail from a handling point of view, because more higher modulus fiber in there means the sail can be lighter for the same strength as a 370 sail.
I know the surface of both is pretty rugged as they go. They can take chafe better than other lines like that. On the topic of furling spars, though, Adrian asks, what are your thoughts on in-mast furling and in-boom furling on a long offshore passage? Those are good questions, and I imagine specifically when they come to reefing. Yeah,
I would say, I mean, they're both going to be okay. I mean, with the in-boom furling, you get a great shaped sail. You get a full roach. You get a proper roach on there, so you've got a really nice sort of shaped sail. The only thing to look out for with in-boom, depending on the system you've got on there, is you will get some chafe at the end of the full length battens, because they have to be made as, rather than going in a batten box like a full length, like a conventional full batten sail would be. These battens go into a soft end, and on something, on a long voyage, they're going to be some sort of chafe at the end of the battens. Not going to happen straight away, and it's certainly not going to happen that it's just something to keep an eye on, the chafe that you're going to get at the end of those full length battens. Reefing wise, my experience, the systems I've used for in-boom furling, they reef very nicely, and you get a nice set sail. And I would say that would be my preference over in-mast from my point of view. But I would just keep one eye on the chafe at the end of the full length battens.
I also say every boat. Go ahead, Ridgely.
I was just going to say something actually. Jeremy, so you're quite happy to be making sails for both in boom and in mast furling. You've got the setup to do that.
Yeah, definitely. We do lots of both for all sorts of types of boat. In mast furling sails with no battens, in mast furling sails with vertical battens on. We've done both of those styles for lots of boats that have crossed the Atlantic and across the Pacific, and it has worked well. And again, with in-boom furling, again, we've done lots of those for boats that doing the Arc this year with in-boom furling systems. We've started a couple of boats are using an in-boom furling system that are doing the Arc this year. and it'll be absolutely perfect for it in terms of setup, nice and reefable. The only thing in boom, probably one downside maybe would be lots of these in-boom systems are only set up for 2 reefs. You can't furl them to anywhere in the sail. You have to furl them to a patch on the sail. And most manufacturers of in-boom furling are only set up for 2 reefs, because when the glue of the sail is more along the mandrel, then the mandrel in the boom isn't set up for taking the 3rd reef position. So you might find that when you get to windier than needing 2 reefs, you've got to furl it all the way and go for a tri-sail or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
One thing I know people have told me as well is with an in-mast sail, you can reef that reaching pretty well. It's going to go in and it's going to come back out well afterwards. With an in-boom sail, the boom angle is critical. You got to have the boom, usually it's about 87 degrees, but you got to have the boom at a specific angle so that the sail rolls down well. It's tough to do that sometimes if the breeze is up, you've twisted off, the vang's a little off, the boom's a little higher, and now it's time to reef and you start rolling the sail down at a different angle. The analogy is it's like rolling toilet paper back onto the roll. If you don't get the angle just right, it's going to want to spool off to one side. So sometimes I know people have found they've had to come up and come more into the wind to reef just so they can get the boom angle under control. That's not always something they want to do, especially with a big following sea. And it can be one thing that you'd have to deal with in an in-boom furler that an in-mast furler wouldn't have to do.
There was a question for Ridgely. If someone's had a fairly major repair on a sail and it seems to be working well, what sort of timescale should they consider actually replacing that sail? What would your advice be on that?
I mean, it depends on the life of the sail at the stage that it was repaired. So if it was a brand new sail and it was taken to one of our certified lofts, I would say the sail would last just as long as it would be expected to from when it was brand new. Now, if it's a sail a little bit later in the life, it's hard to say without seeing the sail exactly, but that's something you work with your sailmaker on, and they give you an honest opinion of what they see in the sail. If this is the John Miles that you're speaking of, I would say if it's just a tape repair, take it into a loft and make sure it's sewn, make sure it's done properly, because a tape repair can work for some time, but the adhesive's going to go, and then you're going to open yourself up to a can of worms. I would say like a nylon sail, like a Jenniker, it's best to have the sail brought in. Windowed out is the term where you cut out the bad material and you stick in new material and sew that down. That's the best way to have it done. Then it shouldn't really affect the life of the sail. I think if you had the sail taped, once the tape goes, the life of the sail's over.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Now, there's a few questions about 4th reefs in mainsails, and one specifically from Philip asking if you have a deep 3rd reef or even a 4th reef. Do sailmakers ever put a different weight of cloth in the top of the sail that is going to be left, that's going to be coping with those heavier wind conditions?
I can take a first shot at that.
Yeah.
The answer is sure, but you have to understand what the trade-off is. In a crosscut sail, for example, could we make the top 3 or 4 panels out of a heavier weight? Sure, absolutely can. What that means though is that is the junction between the heavy panel and then the normal weight panel like that would end up having a big lump in it, because the 2 fabrics would stretch at different rates when you're sailing under normal conditions. So if you're sailing around with a 1st reef and a 2nd reef, you're really stretching out like that panel 5, and the top 4 panels above it are stronger. So when you're in a full sail configuration, the top would be a little bit odd looking. It'd be a little flatter over time. like that. Could it happen? Sure. Fourth reef is usually, we don't like putting numbers on it. It's just a question of how high do you want the reefs? You could put a third reef where the fourth reef is, although it's probably the same kind of question. When you get into radial sails, or certainly 3DI, those are things that can be discussed, and the step up between the panels can be different in a 3DI, especially if the designers know that this could be reefed down. The transition between the normal weight and the heavier weight can be done a lot more gradually, and you wouldn't see a lot of what I'm describing for that transition point.
And I would just step in. I've had, when people have asked me about really high reef, really deep reefing sail, I mean, generally a third reef is between 40 and 50% up the luff. You take away 40% of the luff, maybe 50% of the luff as a really deep third reef, and that's a lot of sail coming down. And when people have asked me for a fourth reef, I generally try and advise against it and say you're better just to drop the sail and put a tri-sail up if you're in really bad conditions, or drop the sail altogether and just go on a storm jib, because having that extra weight attached that high up in the sail all that time, that is not really doing any favors for the longevity of the sail. It's, you've got a lot of weight up aloft that's moving around and flogging over its lifespan. It will actually probably mean the sail doesn't last as long as it would do without that weight up in the mid-leach area. So I generally advise people against hitting a reef higher than 50% or a fourth reef if I can, and encourage them to go for a tri-sail if they really want to be fully prepared for storm conditions.
Yeah, I'd agree with the comment about a deep third reef rather than a fourth reef. I think that you're left with such little sail that it's really not the right thing to do, and you're better going down the tri-sail route.
Yeah,
which also adds visibility because you have it made in orange.
That's right. Tri-sail is much better for it. I mean, tri-sails are set up so that they sheet independently of the boom, because if it gets really bad, it may be your boom is broken and you need a sail that sheets independently of the boom, which a tri-sail would do. It sheet to the aft quarter on the spinnaker box. It also saves your nice mainsail getting an absolute hammering in storm conditions. So you've got a dedicated orange tri-sail to put up to take the abuse when you're getting some seriously bad conditions, whereas your nice sort of mainsail that you use all the other time, will be saving from that abuse.
There's a specific question from Alberto, who's asked whether if you've bought a G0, which is controlled with a sock, can you have it converted to then use it on a furler?
Absolutely.
What would you do for that, Ridgely?
There's a percentage of the luff length that you take, and you work with the customer to figure out the furling system that they would like to use, whether that's supplying a furling system or that would be the customer having a furling system supplied. Then you work with the cable type, the type of furling that they would like to do, whether it's top down, bottom up. And most of the time it involves a slight recut of the sail. Sometimes you get a little luckier than others and you only have to take a few inches or centimeters off the top of the head and a little bit off the tack as well to keep the sheeting angle the same. Sometimes you have to get a little more creative and you take some out of the middle of the sail and just reseam the sail back together. But I mean, this year alone, I've probably done about 10 to 15 conversions that have all worked out well.
What kind of material are you comfortable putting a sun cover on so they could leave it up?
It'd have to be something a little heavier, like at least like 1.5 ounces, or a laminate sail. I'm not the most comfortable with a nylon. I think the sun protection, the UV material, adds a significant amount of weight to a positive sail area, a positive roach on the back edge, and often causes the sail to fold in when you're furling, not leaving the whole sail protected. So I would go up higher. The heavier the cloth, the easier it is to put the sun cover on.
Great. I see the opposite question. It's a Jenniker on a top-down furler wants to go to a sock. Can you do that too?
Absolutely. That's actually the easier version of that. That one, you get rid of the furling gear and then you order a sock that's an appropriate length, just so the clue sticks out just a little bit so the wholesale doesn't get stuck. I think that's actually kind of another point there is when you use the socks, you always want to have both the tack and the clue out of the sock. Otherwise they can get jammed up into the sock and seen some tear that way. So making sure you have the correct length socks pretty important at that stage.
Who do you like next, Andrew?
I was just going to ask a question about new boats and the fact that obviously a new boat comes with a nice new set of sails. Should I be concerned about those new sails in any way? What should I be doing? We've talked a lot about chafe and what we can do to prevent chafe, but what else should I consider in a new suit of sails if they've come with the boat and then not a suit of north sails?
I mean, my opinion on sails that come with the boats is simple. The sailmaker's customer is the boatyard. The boatyard is a business that's trying to make sure that their boat hits the market at a certain price point and that their costs are low enough. So a very significant factor in their decision on how to pick sails is going to be price. Now, they don't, I would say most reputable ones don't go looking for the absolute cheapest ones they can get, but they will certainly assume that, let's just say my experience is they're given a kind of a least common denominator. It's a simple set of sails that kind of looks new and shiny and makes all the right sounds on the first hoist, but a year or so in, they've stretched considerably, and they lose shape quickly. If you understand what you're looking at, it's easily seen. If you don't, you maybe don't notice, but it blows my mind sometimes, because if this new boat comes with an engine that pushes it at 7 knots at 3,500 RPMs, and then in a year you're doing 3,500 RPMs and you're doing 6 knots, or it takes you 4,500 RPMs to get to 7 knots. You've got something there that you can tell, wait a minute, this is not what it used to be. And I don't think people would stand for it in a Yanmar or whatever something's going to put in the boat. In sails, either people don't notice or they just accept that sails are supposed to lose shape and they're not as good as they were a year and a half ago. That's often what you get with OEM sails.
If you're into the boat buying, if they're just buying the boat themselves and they haven't made their decision yet, they might be able to persuade the boat yard to have an upgraded set, or at least make sure that the main's going to come with 3 reefs, not 2, and try and sort of let the yard know, if it's not already all committed, what their plans are with the boat. And then most yards will then understand what the plan is and sort of try and advise them on stuff needed for the boat. Like they're going to need if they're going to do the downwind sailing, they're going to need a boat that's ideally probably set up with a speaker pole on it, so they can pole out head sails downwind. Most boats have a way of being able to pole out the head sail, so that's something to speak to the yard about. And also then, if you're in there early enough, you can ensure that the head sail you've got is cut so that it will actually pole out. Like if it's a really low clued sail, it probably won't pole out to windward very well. Reaching, it needs to be a higher clued reach when they just it'll pole out nicer, or like self-tapping jibs don't normally pole out that well to windward. Certainly when they're standing up, by a new boat that's got a self-tacking jib on, and you're doing an arc type race, arc type rally, you may want to think about from the downwind bit having a conventional overlapping genoa made up that's got a higher clue on it that'll pole out nicely.
I'd say when you're dealing with a new boat situation, the boat builder is expecting to make a certain amount of profit based on the sale of the standard sails. And they usually keep those, pretty simple. When you get to the downwind sails, that's where they really want to make some money, so that those prices jump. You can often find a better deal buying from a local sailmaker when the boat shows up, or even shipping it in to the yard. Similarly, if you say, look, I've got a relationship with a sailmaker, or I want these sails, what credit do I get if I don't take the sails? Well, it's not going to be much, because their business model requires making a certain amount of money. So the credit they give you is going to be, it's not going to be their profit. They're gonna hang on to that. And that's just the way most manufacturers are set up these days. If you want a different water maker, I'm sure they'd supply it, but there's going to be some upcharge of some kind. It's the same thing.
I think the thing that's really been useful about this session is that the key to the success is knowing what you're going to be doing with the boat and where you're going to be going, the sort of sailing conditions that you're going to be encountering. That you've got this most amazing network around the world, but there's still nothing more frustrating than having to do a sail repair in one of those countries that doesn't have one of your lofts, if you're doing a circumnavigation, or indeed in a country where you're a long way from that loft. And getting a new sail into a far-flung country is never easy, and it's time consuming. And the vast majority of people who are with us on this webinar are people that want to go cruising and enjoy their time away cruising. And so the minimum amount of time that you have to spend getting sails repaired, or maybe getting a new sail shipped in, the better. And that's why it's really very sensible to look at your sails in great detail before you do set off. And Bob mentioned about an engine not performing. It's so true that the sails are the driving force of any sailing boat. The engine's there for when there's no wind, and so you need to give your sails as much care as you do, if not more, servicing your engine. And it's so important to look after your sails and have the right sails to make sure that you enjoy your trip. So I'd like to just take the opportunity to thank North Sails for joining in with the webinar this afternoon, and maybe just ask each of you to give your own little roundup of the session and what lessons they should be taking away from it. So maybe Ridgely, starting with you.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things from this is just making sure your stuff's checked out, looked over, and taken care of, putting away dry, and just keeping a close eye on what you're using, and making sure there's no chafe or anything appearing. Preparation is key. So thank you, guys.
Excellent. Thank you, Ridgely. And Bob?
Keep asking. Any sailmaker you talk to is going to have some ideas. Most of the time, most of those ideas have come from the questions previous people have asked that needed answers. Keep asking. You will know many things on your boat better than we do. We will have significant input that will help you when you interpret it and apply it to your boat. But this isn't a race boat where I've raced that boat in 80 world championships and know exactly what to tell you. This is the adventure you've chosen. We want to be one source of the information that you get to help you enjoy that adventure.
Thank you. And just before I go to Jeremy, do you have on your website a table of wind speeds for material strengths, or is that something that gets supplied with each sail that you provide?
It's tricky because the same weight material will have different wind speed tolerances depending on how it's used and the shape of the sail itself. When someone gets a new sail, yes, based on that sail design, we can make recommendations for usable wind speeds. Yeah, it's hard to do it in general.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. And Jeremy?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank everyone for joining us on this call. It's been great to share about North Sails and and connect with some people doing this amazing rally. And what I would say, just make sure, you get in contact with, to prepare yourselves. I would get in contact with a local sailmaker, your local sailmaker, or get in contact with us here and arrange to have the sails, fully checked over to make sure that everything is, really ready to go. Because the guys on the loft floor, the guys in the service departments, they really do pick up on stuff that maybe other people don't see, and that could really save a lot of hassle down the line. If there's not something that's needs servicing or needs changing, it'll save a lot of hassle when you get to these far-flung places where you're hoping to get to.
Okay, so once again to all of you that have been joined us for this afternoon, thank you very much for doing so, and to our panelists, Ridgely, Bob and Jeremy, thank you very much indeed for your time and for the useful webinar this afternoon. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Take care.
Bye.